Okay, we have been studying Revelation, and this evening we are going to begin looking at chapter 13. And basically, what we will be seeing in this chapter is the dragon or the serpent or Satan and his helpers being active in doing what they have committed themselves to do against Christ and against his church. Just to remind us of where we are in the broader scheme of things. We are in the fourth vision of Revelation. Remember that when we began, we observed that Revelation, the book, is divided into 7 sections, and each section is a more or less repeat or recap of the first, or we can also say that it is looking at the same thing from different angles, different standpoints. Different things are being emphasized in each section, but the 7 sections are actually addressing the same period. The period that is being addressed is the period between the first and second coming of Jesus Christ to accomplish our salvation for us. And we know that when he returns the second time, it will be the end or the last aspect of his salvation, in that he will be taking us out of the sinful world and taking us to be with him. Theologically, that is described as we are being glorified. Our sinful body will be taken away. We'll be given a new body that can live in God's presence, and we will be living in his presence eternally as his people, as his children, as inheritors of his kingdom. So this is the period that is being dealt with. And in doing so, what we have seen in Revelation, or what we have understood, is that it is not speaking only of future events, but it is speaking of past, present, and future events to communicate to us the fullness of the salvation that Jesus Christ accomplished on our behalf. The time that we are living in is what we may call the middle period. And that is the period that we are focusing on, that we believe Revelation is focusing on the most. The middle period where the people of God are called upon to live in his presence after the coming of Jesus Christ, to live on earth holy and upright lives, as it were preparing us to enter into the final part of our salvation when we enter into heaven. So basically, that is what we have been looking at. We are now in, as I said, the fourth vision or the fourth section of the 7-part division of Revelation. And that section is from chapter 12 to chapter 14. We just finished looking at chapter 12. And this evening we'll be looking at chapter 13, or begin to look at chapter 13. The dragon tried to kill the seed of the woman. That is what we saw in chapter 12, basically, that the dragon or the serpent tried to kill the seed of the woman. Remember that the chapter began by telling us about the woman that was ready to give birth, and the dragon was in her presence, ready to destroy the child that was to be born. We know from looking at the chapter, going through the chapter, that the child was born, that the dragon was not able to destroy him, that he lived a full life. The person is Jesus Christ. That was the child. He completed the work that was given to him, and he returned to heaven. We saw also in the latter part of the chapter that the dragon, when he realized that he could not get the child, that he could not destroy the child, he turned to the woman whom we recognize as the church, the woman picturing the church, through whom the child came, through whom Jesus came. He turned his attention to the church, the people of God, and began to persecute the people of God because he didn't succeed in doing what he wanted to do with the child. So during this entire period, the church will be persecuted by the dragon or by the serpent. This is what he has given himself to do And this is what he is doing during this period, this time in which we live. So that will also be fulfilling what Jesus Christ has said concerning us. All those who seek to live upright lives in serving him and so on, we will be persecuted. We will suffer at the hands of our fellow men. That is guaranteed to us in this life. But what is also guaranteed to us in this life is that we will end up being victorious. It doesn't matter what the world does to us, what our fellow men do to us, we will be successful, we will be victorious. We will not lose the salvation that has been given to us by Jesus Christ. But the dragon, in spite of all of that, the dragon will continue to persecute the church, the woman, and we are to expect that to happen. Whatever form the persecution might take in whichever part of the world, he will be persecuting the church. And that will be throughout the entire world. Some places it might be worse than others, but the persecution is on nonetheless. Okay, and that is a sort of review of what we have looked at. And to continue on, I want to read the last two verses of chapter 12, so that will set us up for the beginning of chapter 13 as we begin to look at chapter 13 this evening. So verse 16 of chapter 12 says, "But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and drank up the river which the dragon poured out of his mouth." Remember what we saw concerning that last time around, that in persecuting the church, the dragon is in the first instance using words, principles, doctrines, and things like that in order to confuse, in order to cause the people of God to turn from the truth and turn to what is false. And we summarized or we described that as a war between words. This is what is taking place. God has presented to us his truth, and the devil is countering God's truth by presenting lies in order to get the church to turn from the truth and follow the lies. And that is the war, that is one aspect, we may say the first level of persecution that is coming toward us from the devil. It is a war of words. The truth against the false, and the false against the truth. Christ against the devil, and the devil against Christ. Basically, that is what is taking place. It is a war of words. Verse 17 says, "So the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus." That is saying to us that some people in the church might be deceived. The world will be deceived by the devil. But the church, the majority of God's people, will remain true and faithful. And those who may fall from time to time, they will be restored, they will be brought back. Because as we have seen, Jesus Christ is in the midst of his church, taking care of it. When the church goes into apostasy, he is still there. He restores, he delivers. He will even bring a local church to an end if it will not repent and turn back. We have seen all of that in Revelation already. So all those who will remain faithful to the truth and will not be sucked in by the evils, by the wicked words, the wicked principles and doctrines and so on, that the devil brings to the people of God, all those who continue on, he will not leave them alone. Verse 17 is saying that he is enraged because the woman continues to resist. So he went out to continue to make war with the children of God, the people of God, those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus Christ. So he is not going to give up. We have to make sure that we know what the truth is, that we hold to the truth no matter how pleasant, how like the truth the false may appear. We need to be able to recognize the truth, hold to the truth, live by the truth, and so be faithful to our God and our Christ. Let us not be sucked in, no matter what the devil presents to us. Let's hold to the truth and live according to it. And that is what we have looked at so far, towards the end of chapter 12. Now we go into chapter 13, verse 1, where it says, "And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names." As we read through this section, I want you to check some of the things or the expressions or the numbers or anything that we have looked at before, any symbol that seemed to be repeating itself in this section, and remind yourself of what those symbols or numbers or statements mean. Because what we are seeing here, as we have seen before, will be a repeat of some things, and they might be applying to a different group, a different set of people, or things like that, but the meaning will be the same. Chapter 13, verse 1 says, "And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads." We have come across this number or these two numbers before, and I trust that we remember what they represent. If you do not remember what these two numbers represent, let me know and I will remind you. But they will represent the same thing that they represented from inception. So whether it is used in connection with the positive things, referring to Jesus Christ and to God and so on, or whether it is used with respect to negative things, referring to the devil and what he is doing, the meaning will be the same. So once we see the 10 and the 7, apply the meaning that you know that is referred to this situation also. Verse 2 says, "And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority." So what we can conclude from this is that the dragon is organizing help. Let's put it like that. The dragon is using others to work with him in doing his evil work. So he is not working alone. And that is something that we need to remember all the time. We also need to remember that the dragon is not an infinite creature, but he's a finite creature. In other words, he could only be one place at a time. He cannot be everywhere present as God is. So when we think about him doing his work, we need not think that he might be just by us or with us, tempting us and whatever. He has agents that he's using. He has helpers that he's using. And he doesn't have to work hard on us, and I believe we talked about this before. He doesn't really have to work that very hard on us. You know why? Because sin is within us. And we sin even without being tempted or coaxed by the devil or any of his helpers. We sin. But in this case, what we are seeing here is that the devil is not working alone. He has helpers, and we have seen something of that already in our previous studies when the scripture told us that there was war in heaven. When Satan attempted to overthrow God, he was defeated by God's angels, God's holy angels. He was cast down to earth, and all those who were following him, all the angels who were following him were cast down to earth with him also. So he has a lot of helpers. The description of the beast should spark something in our minds also. Look at what it says. "And the beast which I saw was like a leopard," number 1. "And his feet were like those of a bear, number 2, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion, number 3. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. So the beast was acting as a number 1 agent of the devil. Now we need to remember that we are not looking at an actual beast, something that actually looked like a leopard, a physical material thing. We are not looking at that. Remember, we have to keep on bearing in mind that these are symbols representing things that are real. So it's not an actual beast that looks like a leopard. Okay, I have a question. Does anything in this verse remind us of anything in the Old Testament? It doesn't have to be the exact thing. Once it reminds you of something, I need you to tell the rest of us what it reminds you of. Anything in this verse? Nobody? Okay, then, well, let's go on. We'll have to come back to that at some point. Verse 3 says, I saw one of his horns as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. Does this verse remind you of anything that you know of in the Bible? If verse 2 was too difficult, this one should not be as difficult. Does this verse remind you of anything that you know of in the Bible, or of anything that we have already looked at in Revelation?
Has it got something to do with Isaiah 53?
Isaiah 53. Okay, that is very broad. If you have any further thing that will explain what you mean, fine. If not, thanks for your contribution. Anybody else? If Sister Leah has nothing further to say on that? Nothing from anybody else? Okay, then let's go to verse 4. They worshipped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him? What about this verse? Does it remind you of anything in the Bible, or of what we have already looked at in Revelation?
I'm not really remembering the details of it. All I can think about is when the statue was built by, was it the king of Babylon?
Yes, Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar, and he wanted them to bow down and worship him.
Okay. That will be concerning this verse 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the thing that they made to be worshipped was made out of different types of material. Part of it was clay, part of it was this, part of it was that. No, that was a dream. Sorry, that was a dream.
Right. That was a dream. But what was the statue made of?
The statue was made out of gold.
Yes, the whole thing was made of gold.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at verse 5. There was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. Verse 6. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. So his attack in the first instance was directed to heaven and to God. Verse 7. It was also given to him to make war with the saints, to overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. So this is referring to his activities that's directed to earth. And once again, we see an expression here that we came upon before, and I trust that that is ringing something in your mind. The expression is authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation. And that tells us about the number 4 and what 4 is supposed to represent in Revelation. I trust you remember that. Verse 8, all who dwell on the earth will worship him. And that is very important that we remember also. All who dwell on the earth will worship him. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. So when it says all who dwell on the earth will worship him, it doesn't mean absolutely all who dwell on the earth. All doesn't mean all in this sense. It means those who have not been called by God to be his people, those whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life. In other words, the people of God will never worship the evil one. Once we have become the people of God, we will never worship the evil one. Look at the verse again. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, that is the beast. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb of God who has been slain. So those whose name has been written in the book of life, God's book of life, they will never worship. They will not be among those who worship the beast. Remember, we saw something of the book of life in Revelation in our previous studies already. And that was in the first section. And this, once again, will be reminding us that what we are looking at in these sections are not new things, but it is the same thing. Verse 9, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. This expression too, we came upon it before in Revelation also. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. In other words, the saints will be around and they will go through these things, but the saints will persevere. We will not be taken away. We will not lose what we have been given by God. The saints will persevere through these things. In other words, we will not be taken out of the world so that we will escape these things that will be happening on earth. We will be here when it's happening, but we will persevere. We will not lose our faith. I want to go back up and read over some of the sections, but I want to put something in your mind so that you, as we read, you will look at what we are reading in the context of what I am putting into your mind. Remember what this whole thing is about, what the revelation is all about. It is really about a battle, a war going on between Satan and God, or Satan and Christ. That is what is taking place. Since Jesus Christ defeated the serpent on the cross and was raised from the dead and went back to heaven, he is the captain of the Lord's host. He is the one that is leading God's people in the fight against all evil, including the devil. And he is the one, because he accomplished our salvation on the cross and by his resurrection, he is the one that is deserving of our worship. The devil, on the other hand, wants people to worship him rather than to worship God. And so the war that's taken place could be viewed from this angle also. That two people or two persons or personalities are vying for the attention or the worship of the people of the world, of human beings. And because of this, this battle is going on. So let's look at the verses again and look at it in this context of the war of worship, or this battle that is going on between the dragon and the seed of the woman that has already defeated the dragon. So let's go back up to verse 1. It says, "And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his head were blasphemous words." We know that the blasphemous words were first of all directed towards heaven and towards God. 10 and 7, they speak of completeness, of perfection. And that completeness and perfection we saw in our previous studies. These numbers were applied to Jesus Christ, his work for God's perfection and the completeness of God's salvation and all of that. We saw it applied in that regard before. Now we are seeing the 10 and the 7 being applied to the dragon, the exact opposite, but it means the same thing. "And the dragon stood on the sand of the sea. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns." What does that represent? Perfect power, absolute power. 7 heads, complete authority, because that is what 7 represents. Completeness. The perfect number 10 representing perfect power, the horns representing power, and the heads representing authority or rule. If it is 7 heads, it is absolute, complete authority. But isn't this what God has and what Jesus Christ has? Because Jesus Christ said, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth and under the earth." All authority. But here it is that the dragon is giving to his assistant absolute power, complete authority. So who is it that has complete authority and absolute power? Is it the beast or is it the Christ? Which one? I know you will say it is the Christ. So if that is true, if that is the case, what is the message that is being communicated to us here? The message that is being communicated is that the dragon is behaving like God and doing what God did as he continues his attempts to rule this world. The dragon is behaving like God because Jesus Christ said, "All authority has been given to me," and the authority was given by God the Father. Here the dragon is using his assistant and is giving his assistant all power and complete authority. The same thing that is true of God and his relationship to Jesus Christ, the devil is claiming that to himself. In his attempts to destroy the church, because remember, this is what we have been seeing. Attacking the woman, he poured out a river of water to consume the woman. And that wasn't successful because there are still those who keep to the commandments and they are still following God. So he is focusing on those. And what is he doing? He has brought up his assistant and given his assistant the same kind of authority that was given to Jesus Christ, who rules his church. So he is copying God in his activities. This is the message that we need to get. He is copying God, mimicking God, with the same end in view that God has. Complete worship from those who are his people, or complete worship from the world, because he created the world. And he is the only one that is supposed to be worshipped. But the world has turned and it's not worshiping him. So the devil is putting himself in the same place that God is in this world to rule with the same kind of authority, and we can say with the same kind of service from his servant as Jesus Christ gave to his God, to his Father. Questions or comments on that?
Is it that he actually has the authority, or he appears to have the authority?
Well, he has authority. We cannot say that he doesn't, because authority has been given to him, and as we go through Revelation, we will see. Yes,
Yeah, but you keep saying God has absolute authority.
Yes, God has absolute authority.
And then you have now said that the dragon has absolute authority.
And that is what the numbers will represent, as far as his thinking is concerned, as far as what is being revealed to John is concerned. That is what the numbers will communicate, 10 and 7. So we can, in using those numbers, we can say that the authority that has been given to him is absolute. But it is not absolute over God, obviously. But to put it another way, as far as ruling the affairs of this world, governed by the world principles, the one who has absolute authority over that is the devil. He is the one that's calling the shots.
If we look at God's dealings with Job, and when whoever came to ask for permission to interfere with Job,
the devil,
yeah, and he was given permission,
right?
But it was not absolute. It was, yeah, but you could do A, B, C, and D. You can't do anything else but A, B, C, and D.
Right. Right.
But it was not absolute.
In a sense, it was. Because he could have done whatever he wanted within the limits that was given him. And it is the same thing that is here.
Because that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing he was given authority. And although it appears to be absolute, it was still controlled by God.
Right. And it is still restricted. He cannot do exactly all that he wants. Yeah. Right. But he is the one that has the final authority as far as that aspect of it is concerned. Under God, let's say God using him, he could do all that God has given to do, and nobody could go above him and supersede what he is doing. The only person that can do that is God. But everybody else in the world, they are under him, and they cannot supersede what he does. And I believe we must see it like that because of the use of the two numbers. What the two numbers represent, 10 and 7. Perfection and completeness, that is what it represents. And once it is used there, we have to apply the meaning. But we know that it is all under God. So he could go to the fullest extent of the limit that God has given to him. And nobody could challenge him on what he decides to do within the limits given to him by God to operate. All right, so that is what we need to see as we continue to read through the section. We have to read it within that framework of thinking, that it is within the framework of the war, the battle that is going on, and the place or the position that the devil is seeking to occupy. Remember that the reason why he was cast down to earth, why there was war in heaven, he was defeated and cast down to earth, the reason why that happened is because of his attempt to overthrow God. And he has not given up on that. Remember also that the battle is between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman that started back in Genesis. And that same battle is continuing. And the devil is using all his power, all his might, all that he can do to accomplish his purpose. 10 and 7. He's not stopping short. He's going the full distance, using all that he has at his disposal in an effort to accomplish his goal. 10 and 7. And the helper that he has brought up from the sea, he has given to that helper that absolute power under him and under God, but he has given all the power that he has given it to his helper. So the helper then is able to do all that the devil can do.
So the helper is not necessarily one individual or one person, or
no, it
could
is
be a
not.
group of people.
Right.
A group of whatever.
Right.
Spirits, people, whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and seeing that you brought that up, that was supposed to come later, but I'll just mention it. The sea represents people in Revelation, represents the nations of the world in Revelation. So seeing that this beast comes up out of the sea as a ruler to lead and so on, we have to look at this as applying first and foremost to governments and leaders of governments. So it is not like one individual. If we are applying it to an individual, it will be the leader of the nation, the government, the world, whatever. Okay, our time is almost gone, so we'll just comment briefly on verse 2. And then just to remind us, once again, looking at it in this context, remind us of what this is supposed to represent, how we are supposed to see it. Look at verse 2 again. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet was like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. So in other words, he didn't even have to ask the devil for anything or what to do anything. He just do whatever because he has all the power that belonged to the devil. That is what he passed on to this creature. But look at the description. It's like a leopard, a bear, and a lion. 3 animals. If we go back to the Old Testament, where Ruth went back to in Daniel, and we will see in Daniel the dream that Daniel had with these animals in the dream representing the leadership of the nations or the empires that were to come and what they represented. This is where our mind needs to go back. And in this case here in Revelation, all the animals are united in one. So this thing had to be some kind of monster here in Revelation. But in Daniel, there were separate animals. There was a leopard, there was a bear, there was a lion, and there was one other one. But this is where we need to go back, because that is where it came from. So you can go back and read Daniel chapter 7 and you will get the picture. So what we are looking at here, once we read this, it should remind us of Daniel's prophecy in the Old Testament, because that is where these pictures, these images, these symbols, that is where it came from. And what it represented back then, if the interpretation was given to us in Daniel, whatever it represented back then is the same thing that is going to represent here in Revelation. So I will encourage you to go back and read chapter 7 in Daniel. And if you need to read more than that to get the meaning, if the interpretation was given as to what these things represented, to get that meaning and come back to Revelation and apply that meaning to what we are seeing here in Revelation. So the dragon the devil, the serpent, gave his power and his throne and his great authority to this beast to do to the people of God whatever they could have done under God's authority within the limits and the restrictions that God would have given to them. So in other words, the church will be persecuted because God is allowing the church to be persecuted by the devil and his followers. But he can only do what God allowed them to do, and they cannot destroy the church. They cannot take away from you what God has given to you in the salvation that you have received in Jesus Christ. But we will be persecuted because the devil and his followers have the power and the authority given to them by God to persecute the church. Remember, that is what he is doing. The woman has been taken into the wilderness by God to the place that was prepared for her to be protected from the onslaught of the evil one. The evil one has gone after her in her protected place and is persecuting her in her protected place. But God is limiting and restricting what they can do, what he can do, and what his helpers can do. God is limiting and restricting. So it is not that we are taken out and that we will not be persecuted. We will be. But we are in the protected place, in God's place, in God's arms, in the hand of Jesus Christ, and in the hand of God, as the New Testament tells us in the Gospel of John. We are in God's hands. We are in Jesus' hands. That is our protected place, our place of protection. And no one can take us out of God's hands and out of Jesus' hands. No one. We are in our place of protection. But we will still be persecuted while there. Okay, then let's close in prayer, remembering that although we know that we will be persecuted, although we know that the devil is after us, we must also know that we are to live holy and upright lives in God's presence. And we must not provide for the devil the avenues and the means by which he will persecute us by living unrighteous lives in this world. We must not make it easy for him to do that and be successful to whatever extent he will be successful in tempting us. We must not make it easy. We must be the children of God and live like the children of God. And let him come with all his arsenal against us. But God has given to us all that we need to fight against him. We must therefore put on the full armor and fight to the death. Do not make it easy for him to accomplish his purposes in our lives. That is our responsibility. And I trust that we will take it up and do it seriously. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you. We thank you for your goodness to us. We thank you for your word. We thank you for your relationship with us. We thank you that we are secured in you because from the foundation of the world, our names were written in your book of life, and nobody could take us out from there because you wouldn't take us out. You will not erase our names. Therefore, nobody can touch us as far as that is concerned. And we thank you for this. Through Jesus Christ, the Lord. Amen.